The stars trembled when the Zenthroni ships moved through space. Their massive vessels cut through the darkness like blades made of crystal and metal. Each ship was bigger than most space stations. The hulls shone with a cold blue light that made other species look away in fear. The Zenthroni were not like other beings in the galaxy. They did not have soft flesh or warm blood. Their bodies were made of living crystal that grew from their home planet deep in the galaxy's center. They stood 12 feet tall on average. Their limbs were sharp and angular like broken glass. Where other species had eyes, the Zenthroni had clusters of bright gems that could see across many different types of light. For 1,000 years, the Zenthroni Empire had grown larger and stronger. They had conquered 400 worlds. They had destroyed countless species. They had enslaved millions of beings. Their technology was far beyond what most civilizations could understand. Their weapons could crack planets in half. Their shields could stop the power of entire stars. The Zenthroni believed they were perfect. They thought all other life forms were mistakes that needed to be fixed or removed. They called organic life the soft plague, and considered it their duty to clean the galaxy of such weakness. Every species they met had the same two choices: become slaves or die. In the great crystal cities of their homeworld, the Zenthroni kept detailed records of every species they had destroyed. They had libraries filled with the final moments of dying civilizations. They watched these recordings for entertainment. The screams and pleas of defeated enemies were like music to their crystalline ears. Their empire was ruled by the Crystal Council, 7 ancient Zenthroni who had lived for thousands of years. These beings had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. They had watched as their fleets turned green worlds into empty rocks floating in space. They felt no pity or regret. To them, conquest was as natural as breathing. The Zenthroni. Military was organized into great fleets. Each fleet had enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. The ships were controlled by war masters, elite Zenthroni warriors who had proven themselves in hundreds of battles. These war masters competed with each other to see who could destroy civilizations the fastest. War Master Kethvar was one of the most feared commanders in the Empire. He had personally overseen the destruction of 47 species. His flagship, the Crystal Fang, was a massive dreadnought that could split moons with a single shot. Kethvar took pride in collecting the final transmissions of dying species. He kept them in his private chambers and played them when he wanted to remember his victories. The Zenthroni had a particular hatred for what they called water worlds. These planets were covered in oceans and supported carbon-based life. The Zenthroni found such worlds disgusting. The idea of life swimming in liquid made their crystal forms shiver with revulsion. They had developed special weapons just for destroying water worlds, turning their oceans into steam and their continents into glass. Most species in the galaxy knew about the Zenthroni. They were the nightmare that parents used to scare their children. Trade routes changed direction to avoid Zenthroni space. Entire civilizations had moved to the far edges of the galaxy just to stay away from the Crystal Empire. The Zenthroni. Expansion followed a pattern that never changed. First, their scout ships would find a new system with intelligent life. These scouts would study the target species for several months. They would learn about their technology, their population, and their military strength. The scouts would also search for anything valuable that the Empire might want to keep. Once the scouts finished their work, a Zenthroni fleet would arrive. The fleet would position itself just outside the target system and broadcast a message. The message was always the same. You have been chosen for integration into the Zenthroni Empire. Surrender immediately, and some of your population will be allowed to serve as slaves. Resist, and your entire species will be eliminated. You have 72 standard hours to decide. Some species surrendered immediately. They had heard the stories about Zenthroni power and chose slavery over death. These lucky civilizations were stripped of their technology and their strongest members. The rest were relocated to prison worlds where they spent their lives mining crystals for their masters. Other species chose to fight. These brave civilizations sent their fleets to battle the Zenthroni invaders. The battles never lasted long. Zenthroni technology was simply too advanced. Their energy shields could absorb massive amounts of damage. Their weapons could destroy ships from incredible distances. Most importantly, their faster-than-light engines allowed them to appear anywhere on a battlefield instantly. The longest resistance the Zenthroni had ever faced lasted 6 standard days. That was the Corvani defense, a coalition of 12 species that worked together to stop Zenthroni expansion. They had built massive space fortresses and filled them with the best weapons their combined technology could create. They had trained for decades specifically to fight the crystal invaders. The battle was magnificent and terrible. Thousands of ships fought across dozens of star systems. The combined fleets of 12 species threw everything they had at the Zenthroni forces. For a brief moment, it seemed like the Crystal Empire might actually be stopped, but the Zenthroni had been fighting for 1,000 years. They knew every trick that organic species might try. When the coalition forces were fully committed to the battle, the Zenthroni revealed weapons that no one had seen before. Planet-killer missiles that could destroy worlds in minutes, gravity bombs that created artificial black holes, ships that could phase in and out of normal space. By the end of the 6th day, the Corvani defense was completely destroyed. 12 species had been reduced to empty space and floating debris. The Zenthroni added their final transmissions to the Imperial Library. War Master Kethvar himself had led that campaign, and it remained his proudest achievement. Now, the Zenthroni Empire was looking toward the outer rim of the galaxy. There were still many systems there that had not been conquered. The Crystal Council had decided it was time to finish cleaning that section of space. They had detected dozens of species that still lived free lives on their little worlds. One of these species called themselves humans. They lived on a blue water world in a system with only one star. The Zenthroni scouts had been watching them for several months now. The humans seemed to be a typical young species. They had only recently developed space travel. Their largest ships were tiny compared to Zenthroni vessels. Their weapons used primitive chemical reactions and nuclear fusion. The scout reports described humans as being remarkably unremarkable. They were small organic beings with soft pink skin and tiny teeth. They lived short lives of less than 100 years. They seemed to spend most of their time fighting among themselves over resources and territory. Their technology was advancing rapidly, but they were still thousands of years behind Zenthroni science. The humans did have one interesting quality. They seemed to be unusually stubborn for such a weak species. The scouts had observed their history and found that humans rarely gave up even when facing impossible odds. They would continue fighting long after any reasonable being would surrender. This was seen as a minor curiosity rather than a serious concern. War Master Kethvar had requested permission to handle the human conquest personally. The Crystal Council had agreed, thinking it would be a simple mission to add to his record. They expected the humans to surrender quickly once they saw the power of a Zenthroni fleet. If not, the conquest would probably take less than a day. The fleet that was assembled for the human conquest was smaller than usual. Only 50 ships, including Kethvar's flagship. This was considered more than enough firepower to handle a single primitive world. Some members of the Crystal Council thought even 50 ships was excessive for such a weak target. As the Zenthroni fleet prepared to depart for human space, there was excitement throughout the Empire. News of the upcoming conquest had spread to every crystal city. Citizens gathered in public spaces to watch the live broadcasts that would show the destruction of another organic species. Betting pools opened on how quickly the humans would surrender. The Zenthroni had conquered so many species that they had developed a sense of routine about it. They knew exactly how long each type of civilization would last. Water world species usually surrendered within hours. Desert species might fight for a day or two. The few spacefaring civilizations they had encountered typically lasted about a week before being completely destroyed. Humans were classified as a water world species with primitive space capability. The official estimate was that they would surrender within 6 hours of seeing the Zenthroni fleet. If they chose to fight, they would be eliminated within 24 hours. These predictions were based on 1,000 years of conquest experience. The Zenthroni did not know that they were wrong. They did not know that humans were different from every other species they had encountered. They did not know that humans had been watching them just as carefully as they had been watching humans. Most importantly, they did not know that humans had been preparing for this moment for much longer than anyone thought possible. The Zenthroni Empire continued its 1,000-year routine. Ships moved through space. Weapons were charged. Records were prepared to document another victory. The crystal beings prepared themselves for what they expected to be the easiest conquest in their long history. They had no idea that they were about to make the worst mistake any species had ever made. They had no idea that they were flying toward their own destruction. They had no idea that the small, soft humans they planned to destroy would soon become the most feared force in the galaxy. The Zenthroni fleet flew through the darkness toward Earth, carrying with them the confidence of 1,000 years of victories. Behind them, their empire continued its daily routine, never imagining that these would be the last normal days they would ever know. The warning came on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. Deep space monitoring stations picked up the energy signatures first. Massive objects were moving through faster-than-light space toward the solar system. The readings were unlike anything humans had ever seen before. Dr. Sarah Chen was the first person to understand what the readings meant. She worked at the Titan Observatory, one of humanity's most advanced space monitoring facilities. When the computer alerts started screaming, she thought there must be an equipment malfunction. The energy levels were simply too high to be real, but the readings kept coming from multiple stations. Deep space arrays throughout the solar system were all detecting the same thing. Something huge was approaching Earth. Something that contained more energy than entire star systems. Within hours, the news had reached every government on Earth. Emergency meetings were called. Military leaders gathered in secure bunkers. Scientists worked frantically to understand what was coming toward them. The general public remained unaware, but those in power knew that humanity was about to face something unprecedented. The objects dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 50 massive crystalline ships appeared. In perfect formation, each one larger than Earth's biggest space stations. Their hulls reflected starlight in patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Energy readings spiked so high that several monitoring stations had to shut down to avoid damage. For 6 hours, the alien fleet simply waited. They made no attempt to communicate. They performed no scans that human equipment could detect. They just hung in space like a wall of crystal and metal, blocking out entire sections of stars. Then the message came. Every radio frequency on Earth received it at the same time. Every television station, every internet connection, every communication device suddenly carried the same transmission. The voice was cold and sharp, like glass breaking in slow motion. Primitive beings of the third world from this system's star, the voice said. You are being addressed by War Master Kethavar of the Zenthroni Empire. Your species has been selected for integration into our great civilization. The message continued for several minutes. It described the Zenthroni Empire and their 1,000 years of conquest. It explained how hundreds of species had already been integrated or eliminated. It listed the achievements of Zenthroni science and the power of their military forces. You have 2 choices, War Master Kethavar concluded. Surrender immediately, and some members of your species will be allowed to live as servants. Resist, and your entire world will be sterilized. You have 72 standard hours to make your decision. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. Within minutes, every major news network was broadcasting the alien message. Panic began to spread across the planet. Stock markets crashed. Cities experienced massive traffic jams as people tried to flee to rural areas. Religious leaders declared that the end times had arrived. Military forces around the world went to maximum alert, but in certain secret facilities, a very different reaction was taking place. Deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, in a facility that did not officially exist, Admiral Marcus Webb received a coded message on his personal communicator. The message contained only 3 words: Protocol 7, execute. Admiral Webb had been waiting for this message his entire career. He had trained for it, planned for it, and dreaded it. Now that it had finally arrived, he felt strangely calm. He walked to a vault that required 3 different types of authorization to open. Inside was a single folder marked with symbols that most humans would not recognize. Similar scenes were playing out in hidden facilities around the world. In underground bases, in orbital stations, in research centers disguised as ordinary buildings, humans were opening sealed orders and activating systems that had been sleeping for decades. The general public did not know about these facilities. Most government leaders did not know about them. They were part of a program that had begun long before the Zenthroni scouts had arrived in human space. They were humanity's insurance policy against a threat that many people had hoped would never come. 50 years earlier, human deep space probes had detected evidence of the Zenthroni Empire. The probes had found destroyed worlds, empty systems, and debris patterns that suggested massive space battles. Human scientists had analyzed the data and reached a terrifying conclusion. There was something in the galaxy that was systematically destroying other civilizations. A secret international committee had been formed to study the threat. They called it the Genocide Prevention Project. Their mission was simple: figure out how to protect humanity from whatever was destroying other species. The project received unlimited funding and access to humanity's best minds. Everything they did was classified far above normal government security levels. For 50 years, the project had been preparing. They had built weapons that officially did not exist. They had developed technologies that were supposedly impossible. They had created strategies based on the assumption that humanity would one day face an enemy with vastly superior conventional technology. Now that day had arrived. As panic spread across Earth's surface, Admiral Webb was issuing orders to facilities that the public had never heard of. Ships that did not appear on any official registry began powering up their engines. Weapon systems that had been tested only in computer simulations came online for the first time. The Zenthroni fleet remained at the edge of the solar system, confident in their overwhelming superiority. War Master Kethvar was pleased with the human reaction. The panic and chaos on Earth's surface was exactly what he expected from a primitive species facing certain doom. Kethvar had dealt with thousands of civilizations over his long career. He knew all the patterns. First came denial, then panic, then desperate attempts at negotiation, and finally either surrender or futile resistance. The humans were following the script perfectly. On the second day, Earth's governments attempted to establish diplomatic contact with the Zenthroni fleet. They sent messages offering to negotiate terms for peaceful coexistence. They promised to share human technology and resources. They begged for more time to consider the Zenthroni ultimatum. War Master Kethvar ignored these messages completely. The Zenthroni did not negotiate with inferior species. They conquered or they destroyed. There were no other options. Meanwhile, human space forces appeared to be in complete disarray. Ships were launched from Earth in all directions, apparently, carrying refugees fleeing the planet. Military vessels took defensive positions around major population centers. Construction crews worked frantically to build additional orbital defenses. To Zenthroni observers, it looked like exactly what they expected: a desperate, unorganized response from a species that had no hope of mounting effective resistance. The refugee ships were particularly amusing to War Master Kethvar. Where did these humans think they could run that Zenthroni fleets could not follow? On the third day, with only hours remaining before the deadline, Earth's leaders sent one final message to the Zenthroni fleet. The transmission was brief and delivered by a man who identified himself as Admiral Webb, commander of United Earth Defense Forces. His words were simple and direct. "We have received your ultimatum and considered our options carefully. Our response is as follows. Leave our solar system immediately or face the consequences. You have 1 hour to comply with this demand." When this message reached the Zenthroni fleet, War Master Kethvar actually laughed. The sound was like crystal chimes being shattered with hammers. His officers shared his amusement. The idea that these primitive humans would dare to threaten the Zenthroni Empire was beyond ridiculous. Kethvar decided to share the human message with the entire empire. He broadcast it on all communication channels, adding his own commentary about the foolishness of organic species. Across hundreds of Zenthroni worlds, crystal beings gathered to laugh at the humans' pathetic attempt at defiance. The broadcast became one of the most popular entertainment programs in Zenthroni history. Citizens shared it with their friends and family. Children played games where they pretended to be brave humans threatening mighty Zenthroni warriors. It was all very amusing. War Master Kethvar used the human message as an opportunity to demonstrate Zenthroni superiority. He explained to his audience how human technology was thousands of years behind Zenthroni science. He described the primitive weapons that Earth's military forces possessed. He compared human space vessels to toys that Zenthroni children might play with. "These humans have ships that burn chemical fuel," Kethvar said during his broadcast. "They have weapons that throw pieces of metal at their enemies. They have lived on only one world for their entire existence as a species. Yet they dare to threaten us. It would be funny if it were not so pathetic." The hour deadline came and passed. Admiral Webb's ultimatum was ignored. The Zenthroni fleet began moving toward Earth, their massive ships accelerating to combat speed. Energy signatures spiked as weapon systems came online. The conquest of humanity was about to begin. War Master Kethvar ordered his ships into the standard attack formation. The largest vessels would establish orbital bombardment positions around Earth. Smaller ships would eliminate any human space forces that tried to interfere. The entire operation was expected to take less than 6 hours. As the Zenthroni fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune, Kethvar prepared to give the order to begin the attack. He had personally overseen the destruction of 47 species. This would be number 48. After today, humans would join the long list of civilizations that existed only in Zenthroni record libraries. But something was wrong. Kethvar's sensor operators were reporting strange readings from throughout the solar system. The refugee ships that had fled Earth were not where they should be. Instead of running away from the battle, they seemed to be taking positions around the Zenthroni fleet. More concerning were the energy readings coming from these ships. They were much too high for the primitive human technology that Zenthroni scouts had observed. Some of the vessels were generating power signatures that rivaled Zenthroni destroyers. "War Master," his chief sensor operator reported. "I am detecting weapons locks from multiple human vessels. Their targeting systems are far more advanced than our intelligence reports indicated." Kethvar studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The human ships were not fleeing in panic. They were not begging for mercy. Instead, they were surrounding his fleet in a perfect attack formation. Their movements showed a level of coordination and tactical skill that should have been impossible for such a primitive species. "All ships, raise defensive shields," Kethvar ordered. "Prepare for immediate combat operations." As Zenthroni shields came online, Admiral Webb's voice echoed across all communication frequencies one final time. "You were warned. You chose not to listen. Now you will learn why humans are different from every other species you have conquered." The first shot came from a ship that looked like an ordinary cargo freighter. One moment it was drifting silently near Jupiter's orbit, appearing harmless and insignificant. The next moment, space itself seemed to tear open as a beam of pure energy erupted from its hull. The beam struck the Zenthroni destroyer Shard's edge dead center. For a split second, nothing seemed to happen. Then the massive crystal ship simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field, no death. Cry from the crew. The destroyer was there, and then it was not, as if reality had decided it never existed in the first place. War Master Kethvar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The readings made no sense. A primitive human vessel had just erased one of his ships using a weapon that defied all known laws of physics. The energy signature was unlike anything in Zenthroni databases. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Kethvar commanded. "Return fire immediately." The Zenthroni fleet responded with practiced efficiency. 50 crystalline ships opened fire simultaneously, unleashing enough destructive power to sterilize entire planets. Their energy beams and plasma cannons lit up the darkness between worlds. Any conventional fleet would have been vaporized instantly. But the human ships were not conventional. As Zenthroni weapons struck their targets, the human vessels seemed to shimmer and fade. Energy beams passed harmlessly through hulls that suddenly became translucent. Plasma bolts struck shields that absorbed the attacks and somehow redirected the energy back at the Zenthroni ships. 3 more. Zenthroni destroyers vanished under return fire that used their own weapons against them. The crystal ship's advanced sensors could not understand what they were seeing. The human vessels appeared to be phasing in and out of normal space, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Impossible!" Kethvar snarled. "These readings cannot be accurate. No species has this technology." His sensor officer was frantically checking and rechecking the instruments. "War Master, all systems are functioning normally. The human ships are using some form of dimensional manipulation. They are shifting between layers of space-time to avoid our attacks." More human ships revealed themselves throughout the solar system. They had been hiding in asteroid fields behind moons and within the rings of gas giants. Each vessel began broadcasting targeting solutions to the others, creating a coordinated attack network that encompassed the entire battlefield. The Zenthroni found themselves surrounded by an enemy that should not have existed. Ships that looked like simple mining vessels opened weapon ports to reveal cannons that tore holes in reality. Cargo haulers deployed armor plating that seemed to bend light around itself. Even small human fighters demonstrated technology that was theoretically impossible. War Master Kethvar activated the emergency communication array and sent a desperate message back to Zenthroni space. "This is Kethvar. The intelligence reports were completely wrong. The humans have weapons and defenses far beyond what we expected. I am requesting immediate reinforcement." The reply came back within minutes. The Crystal Council's response was cold and dismissive. "War Master Kethvar, you are fighting a single primitive world with 50 ships of the line. Complete your mission or face charges of incompetence upon your return." Kethvar closed the communication channel and focused on the battle. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. His fleet had been reduced to 37 ships, while the humans continued to reveal new vessels from hidden positions throughout the solar system. The human attack pattern was unlike anything in Zenthroni military doctrine. Instead of focusing their fire on single targets, they seemed to be herding the Zenthroni fleet into a specific area of space. Every time Kethvar tried to break his ships out of the encirclement, human forces would appear to block his escape routes. "War Master," his navigation officer reported, "the humans are forcing us toward the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets. I believe they are attempting to trap us in that region." Kethvar studied the tactical display and realized the officer was correct. The human attack pattern was not random. It was carefully designed to push the Zenthroni fleet into a predetermined location. But why would the humans want to fight in an asteroid field? The Space Rocks would provide cover for both sides equally. The answer came when the Zenthroni fleet reached the edge of the asteroid belt. What Kethvar had assumed were natural space rocks suddenly came alive with weapons fire. The asteroids were not asteroids at all. They were camouflaged human battle stations, each one larger than a Zenthroni dreadnought. The trap closed like the jaws of a massive predator. Dozens of hidden fortress ships opened fire simultaneously, creating a storm of energy that turned space itself into a killing field. The human weapons did not simply destroy their targets. They seemed to unravel them at the molecular level, reducing proud Zenthroni vessels to their basic atomic components. Kethvar's flagship shuddered as multiple hits penetrated its shields. Damage reports flooded in from all sections of the ship. The Crystal Fang, which had survived hundreds of battles across the galaxy, was being systematically torn apart by weapons that should not have existed. "Emergency jump to faster-than-light travel," Kethvar ordered. "All surviving ships retreat immediately." But when his navigation officer tried to activate the jump drive, nothing happened. The faster-than-light engines were completely unresponsive. Similar reports came in from the remaining Zenthroni ships. Their most advanced technology, the foundation of their military superiority, had been somehow disabled. "War Master, the humans have deployed some kind of dimensional anchor," the navigation officer reported. "It is preventing any transition to faster-than-light space. We are trapped in normal space until the field is disabled." Kethvar felt something he had not experienced in over 2,000 years of life. Fear. The humans had not only matched Zenthroni technology, they had surpassed it. They had weapons that could erase matter from existence. They had shields that could redirect energy attacks. They had stealth systems that could hide entire fleets. Most terrifyingly, they had dimensional technology that could prevent faster-than-light travel. The battle continued for another 3 hours, but the outcome had been decided in the first few minutes. The Zenthroni fleet was systematically destroyed by an enemy that had spent 50 years preparing for this exact confrontation. Ship after ship vanished under human fire until only a handful of vessels remained. When Kethvar's flagship was the last Zenthroni ship still capable of fighting, Admiral Webb's voice came over the communication channels again. "War Master Kethvar, you have 2 choices. Surrender immediately, and you will be taken prisoner. Continue fighting and your ship will be destroyed like all the others. You have 60 seconds to decide." Kethvar looked around his command bridge. Half of his officers were dead. Most of his ship's systems were offline. The Crystal Fang was bleeding atmosphere and energy from dozens of hull breaches. His proud fleet had been reduced to floating debris. For the first time in Zenthroni history, a War Master surrendered to an enemy force. "I yield," Kethvar transmitted, his voice barely a whisper. "The Crystal Fang surrenders to human forces." Within minutes, human boarding craft had docked with the damaged Zenthroni flagship. Armed humans in advanced combat armor moved through the ship's corridors, securing prisoners and gathering intelligence. They worked with efficient professionalism that reminded Kethvar of his own troops during successful conquests. Admiral Webb himself came aboard the Crystal Fang to accept Kethvar's surrender. The human was smaller than the War Master had expected, but his eyes held the cold certainty of a being who had just achieved total victory. "You lied to us," Kethvar said when Webb entered the command bridge. "Your scouts reported primitive technology, chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. This level of advancement should have taken you thousands of years to achieve." Webb smiled, without humor. "Our scouts reported exactly what we wanted them to see. Every piece of technology your people observed was carefully designed to make you underestimate us. We have been preparing for your arrival for 50 years. Kethvar's crystal form shimmered with shock. 50 years? But how did you know we were coming?" "We have been watching your empire since before you knew we existed," Webb replied. "We found the debris fields you left behind. We analyzed the patterns of destruction across hundreds of star systems. We knew that eventually you would come for us." The admiral gestured toward the tactical displays that showed the destroyed Zenthroni fleet. Every weapon you saw today was designed specifically to counter Zenthroni technology. Every strategy we used was developed from studying your previous conquests. We learned from the mistakes of every species you destroyed. Kethvar felt his crystal core growing cold with a new kind of terror. What are you going to do with me? Webb's expression became even harder. You are going to tell us everything about your empire. Every fleet position? Every colony world? Every military installation? You are going to give us complete intelligence about Zenthroni capabilities and weaknesses. And if I refuse? Then you will watch as we systematically destroy every trace of Zenthroni civilization in the galaxy. Your choice is simple. Help us target your military forces specifically, or be responsible for the complete extinction of your species. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. Around him, human soldiers continued their efficient work of securing the ship. They moved like beings who had been planning this operation for decades. Every action was precise and purposeful. You cannot possibly threaten our entire empire, Kethvar said finally. We have thousands of ships scattered across hundreds of worlds. Even with your advanced technology, you are still just one species on one world. Admiral Webb walked to the main view screen and activated an external camera view. What Kethvar saw made his crystal form tremble with disbelief. The space around Earth was filled with human ships. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands. Massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Zenthroni fleet. Carriers that launched swarms of fighters equipped with reality-warping weapons. Battle stations that were larger than most space habitats. This was just our local defense fleet, Webb said calmly. Our main attack forces are already deploying throughout the galaxy. By the time this conversation ends, human fleets will be in position to strike every major Zenthroni installation simultaneously. Kethvar stared at the impossible armada surrounding Earth. How many ships do you have? Enough, Webb replied. We have been building this fleet in hidden shipyards for 5 decades. Every resource we could spare went into preparing for this war. We built ships in asteroid fields where your scouts would never look. We constructed weapons in deep space factories that do not appear on any star charts. The admiral turned back to face Kethvar directly. Your empire made one fatal mistake. You assumed that because we appeared primitive, we actually were primitive. You never considered that an intelligent species might choose to hide their true capabilities until the moment they were needed. Webb activated a communication panel and spoke into it. Admiral Chen, you are authorized to begin Phase 2 operations. All human fleets are cleared to engage Zenthroni targets galaxy-wide. As acknowledgement signals began coming in from human forces across known space, Kethvar realized that his empire was about to face something it had never encountered before. An enemy that was stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than themselves. The last thing Kethvar heard before being escorted to a detention cell was Admiral Webb speaking to his command staff. Gentlemen, the Zenthroni Empire has 30 days to release every slave species and withdraw to their home world. If they refuse, we will do what they have been doing to others for 1,000 years. The only difference is that we will be much more thorough about it. The Crystal Council met in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. The 7 ancient rulers of the Zenthroni Empire gathered in their great hall on the homeworld, their crystalline forms glowing with agitation and disbelief. Before them floated a holographic display showing the complete destruction of War Master Kethvar's fleet. High Counselor Vexitharn, eldest of the 7, spoke first. His voice carried the weight of 4,000 years of life and conquest. This recording must be fabricated. No single primitive world could possess such technology. The quantum signatures are authentic, replied Counselor Mordeth, who oversaw the Empire's intelligence networks. Our sensors confirm that 50 ships of the line were destroyed or captured by human forces. Kethavar himself is being held prisoner, the Fee. Council chamber fell silent except for the harmonic resonance of crystal beings in deep thought. For 1,000 years, the Zenthroni had been the undisputed masters of the galaxy. Their technology was supreme. Their military was invincible. The idea that some unknown species could challenge them was beyond comprehension. Perhaps this is an isolated incident, suggested Councillor Raykath. One world with unusual defenses. We can simply avoid that system and continue expansion in other directions. High Councillor Vextharn's crystal form flared with anger. We do not avoid anything. The Zenthroni Empire has never retreated from any enemy. We will not begin now because of one setback. But even as the council debated, reports were arriving from across the empire. Human fleets had appeared in dozens of star systems simultaneously. They were not engaging Zenthroni forces directly. Instead, they were positioning themselves near major installations and broadcasting a simple message. The Zenthroni Empire has 30 days to release all enslaved species and withdraw to your homeworld. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. This is your only warning. The message was delivered in perfect Zenthroni language, suggesting that humans had thoroughly studied their culture and technology. More disturbing were the energy readings from the human ships. Each vessel carried enough firepower to threaten entire Zenthroni battle groups. "How many ships are we facing?" asked Councillor Drakvin, the Empire's chief military strategist. "Our current estimates suggest at least 10,000 human vessels," Mordeth replied. "Possibly more. They are equipped with technology that our scientists cannot explain. Some appear to be capable of faster-than-light travel without using conventional jump drives." Councillor Siles, youngest of the seven at only 800 years old, made an unprecedented suggestion. "Perhaps we should consider negotiating with these humans. If their technology is truly superior to ours, we might learn from them." The other council members turned toward her with expressions of shock and disgust. The idea of negotiating with any species was anathema to Zenthroni philosophy. They were the supreme race. They did not negotiate. They conquered or they destroyed. "The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species," High Councillor Vextharn declared. "Send the 7th Fleet to engage the nearest human formation. We will demonstrate that yesterday's defeat was merely an anomaly." The 7th Fleet was one of the Empire's most powerful military formations. 200 ships led by War Master Zalketh, a veteran of 600 conquest campaigns. If any force could restore Zenthroni prestige, it would be the 7th Fleet. War Master Zalketh received his orders with enthusiasm. He had studied the recordings of Kethvar's defeat and believed he understood what had gone wrong. Kethvar had been overconfident and unprepared for advanced technology. Zalketh would not make the same mistakes. The 7th Fleet deployed with full combat protocols. Every ship was equipped with the most advanced Zenthroni weapons and shields. Scout vessels were sent ahead to gather detailed intelligence about human capabilities. Nothing would be left to chance. The fleet's target was a human formation orbiting a Zenthroni mining colony in the Andorian sector. 20 human ships were positioned near the asteroid facilities where millions of enslaved aliens worked to extract rare crystals for the Empire. The human vessels made no attempt to hide their presence. They simply waited in perfect formation. "They are either supremely confident or completely insane," Zalketh observed as his fleet approached the human position. 200 ships against 20. Even with their advanced technology, they cannot hope to survive. The human fleet commander identified himself as Admiral Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Forces. His message to Zalketh was brief and professional. "You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately and release all enslaved beings. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of your fleet." Zalketh broadcast his response across all frequencies so that every being in the system could hear it. "I am War Master Zalketh of the 7th Fleet. We do not take orders from inferior species. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." A battle began exactly 30 seconds later. The human ships moved with impossible speed and coordination. They did not form traditional battle lines or attempt to match the Zenthroni formation. Instead, they seemed to dance through space, appearing and disappearing at will. Their weapons fired in patterns that defied conventional tactics. Zalketh quickly realized that his numerical advantage meant nothing. The human ships could exist in multiple locations simultaneously, creating false targets and attacking from unexpected angles. When Zenthroni weapons managed to strike human vessels, the damage seemed to heal itself within seconds. "War Master, we cannot achieve target locks," his weapons officer reported. "The human ships are phasing in and out of normal space faster than our computers can track. Worse, the human weapons were systematically destroying Zenthroni ships with terrifying efficiency. Each shot seemed designed to exploit specific weaknesses in crystal technology. Armor plating that could withstand star-class energy weapons crumbled under human fire like brittle glass. Within 2 hours, the 7th Fleet was completely destroyed. 200 of the Empire's finest ships reduced to floating debris. War Master Zalketh's final transmission was a desperate plea for reinforcements that would never come. News of the second defeat spread throughout the Zenthroni Empire like a virus. For the first time in their history, crystal beings began to feel something they had never experienced before: doubt. If the mighty 7th Fleet could be destroyed so easily, what force could stand against these humans? The Crystal Council convened again, their earlier confidence replaced by growing panic. Reports continued to arrive from across the Empire. Human fleets were everywhere, appearing in systems that should have been impossible to reach. Their ships moved faster than anything in Zenthroni databases. Their weapons struck with surgical precision. "They are not just technologically superior," admitted Counselor Mordeth. "They understand our psychology, our tactics, our weaknesses. This is not a spontaneous response to our arrival. They have been studying us for decades." High Counselor. Vex Tharn's crystal form was dim with shock and confusion. "How is such preparation possible? Our scouts detected a primitive species with limited space travel. There was no indication of advanced military capability." "Because they did not want us to see it," replied Counselor Siles. "Every piece of intelligence we gathered was carefully crafted to make us underestimate them. They have been manipulating our perceptions from the beginning." The realization that the Zenthroni Empire had been outmaneuvered so completely was devastating to the council members. They had built their entire civilization on the belief that they were the galaxy's supreme species. The idea that another race could be smarter, stronger, and more advanced challenged everything they believed about themselves. As the council debated their response, human fleets continued their methodical advance throughout the Empire. They did not engage civilian populations or destroy inhabited worlds. Instead, they focused on military targets with surgical precision. Zenthroni fleets, orbital fortresses, weapons manufacturing facilities, and command centers were systematically eliminated. The humans fought with a cold efficiency that terrified even veteran Zenthroni warriors. They showed no mercy to military forces, but carefully avoided harming non-combatants. It was as if they were conducting a precise surgical operation to remove the Empire's ability to wage war while preserving everything else. More disturbing were the reports from liberated worlds. As human forces destroyed Zenthroni garrisons, the enslaved species they freed spoke of their liberators with something approaching worship. The humans provided medical aid, food, and transportation to safety. They treated the former slaves with dignity and respect that no one had shown them for generations. "They are not just defeating us militarily," observed Counselor Drakvin. "They are turning our own subjects against us. Every world they liberate becomes a potential ally." 3 weeks into the campaign, the Crystal Council received a personal message from Admiral Webb, the human commander who had captured War Master Kethvar. The transmission was delivered to the council chamber itself, bypassing all of the Empire's security systems as if they did not exist. "Honored members of the Crystal Council," Webb began, his image appearing in perfect clarity before the 7 rulers. "I am addressing you directly to clarify your situation and offer you one final opportunity to avoid the complete destruction of your civilization." The Admiral's tone was respectful but firm, like a teacher explaining a difficult concept to slow students. "Your empire has 7 days remaining to comply with our demands. All enslaved species must be released. All military forces must withdraw to your homeworld. All weapons of mass destruction must be deactivated." Webb paused to let his words sink, before continuing. "If you comply with these terms, your species will be allowed to survive on your homeworld under human supervision. You will be provided with basic necessities but forbidden from developing military technology or leaving your system. If you refuse to comply, we will eliminate every trace of Zenthroni presence in the galaxy. Your ships, your colonies, your military installations, and your industrial facilities will be destroyed. Your people will be relocated to your homeworld, where they will remain under permanent quarantine." The transmission ended with a final warning that chilled the crystal beings to their cores. "Do not mistake our restraint for weakness. We have the power to sterilize your homeworld if necessary. The choice is yours, but this is your final warning." High Counselor Vextharn stared at the space where Webb's image had been. For the first time in 4,000 years of life, he felt completely powerless. The Zenthroni Empire, which had seemed eternal and invincible, was crumbling around them. "How many fleets do we have left?" he asked quietly. "Less than 30% of our original strength," replied Counselor Drakvin. "And most of those are trapped in defensive positions around critical installations. The humans control all major space routes." "What about our secret weapons? The planet killers? The dimensional bombs?" "The humans seem to know about all of them," Mordeth reported. "They have neutralized our most advanced weapon systems before we could deploy them. It is as if they have complete intelligence about our military capabilities." Counselor Siles made another unprecedented suggestion. "Perhaps we should consider surrender. If we comply with their demands, at least our people will survive." The other council members looked at her with a mixture of horror and desperation. The idea of surrendering to any species was unthinkable, but the alternative appeared to be complete extinction. As the Crystal Council debated the unthinkable possibility of surrender, human fleets continued their relentless advance toward the Zenthroni homeworld. Every day brought new reports of destroyed installations and liberated worlds. The 1,000-year empire was collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible. The humans were not just winning the war. They were rewriting the rules of galactic civilization. And they were doing it with a level of planning and preparation that suggested they had been thinking about this conflict for far longer than anyone had imagined. On the 29th day, the last Zenthroni military installation fell silent. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's largest dreadnought, watching as the final Zenthroni fortress surrendered without firing a shot. The massive crystal structure that had once commanded an entire sector of space now hung dark and lifeless in the void, its weapons powered down and its shields collapsed. "That's the last one, sir," reported Captain Martinez from the communications station. "All Zenthroni military forces have either been destroyed or surrendered. The Empire has ceased to exist as a military power." Webb nodded slowly, but there was no satisfaction in his expression. The Zenthroni Empire had been dismantled with mathematical precision over the course of 4 weeks. Every fleet destroyed, every fortress captured, every weapon neutralized. It was the most complete military victory in galactic history, and it had been accomplished with minimal human casualties. But the war was not over yet. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zenthroni homeworld," Martinez continued. "It's from High Counselor Vextharn himself." "Put him through." The main view screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Crystal Council chamber. All 7 members of the ruling council were present, their crystalline forms dim with defeat and exhaustion. High Counselor Vexitharn stepped forward, his ancient voice heavy with the weight of 4 millennia. "Admiral Webb," Vexitharn began, "the Crystal Council formally surrenders all remaining Zenthroni forces to human authority. We accept your terms for the survival of our species." Webb studied the broken ruler of a fallen empire. There was no triumph in the human admiral's eyes, only the cold satisfaction of a job completed. "Have all enslaved species been released?" "Yes. Transportation ships are already moving them to worlds of their choosing. Our slave colonies have been abandoned as you demanded." "And your weapons of mass destruction?" "Deactivated and awaiting. Human inspection teams. You will find that we have complied with every aspect of your ultimatum." Webb was quiet for a moment, consulting data displays that showed the status of liberated worlds throughout the former empire. Millions of beings were being relocated to new homes. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were tasting freedom for the first time in generations. "Your compliance is noted," Webb said finally. "Human forces will begin withdrawal from Zenthroni space within the week. Your people will be confined to your home system as agreed. Any attempt to leave that system or develop military technology will result in immediate intervention." Vextharn's crystal form flickered with what might have been relief. "We understand. The Zenthroni accept your judgment." But Webb was not finished. "There is one more matter to discuss. The punishment for your crimes against galactic civilization." The Crystal Council members looked at each other with confusion and growing dread. They had surrendered completely. Their empire was destroyed. Their people were confined to a single world. What more could the humans want? "Admiral," Vextharn said carefully, "we have accepted all of your terms. Our empire is finished." "What further punishment do you require?" Webb's expression grew even colder. "The punishment has already begun. You simply haven't realized it yet." The Admiral gestured toward an aide who activated a new display showing galactic communication networks. "For the past month, human forces have been systematically removing all references to your species from galactic databases. Every historical record, every cultural archive, every mention of the Zenthroni Empire is being erased." Vextharn's crystal form blazed with sudden understanding and horror. "You cannot mean the name Zenthroni is being deleted from the collective memory of galactic civilization," Webb continued relentlessly. "Within a generation, no one will remember that your empire ever existed. The species you conquered will remember their liberation, but not who they were liberated from. The worlds you destroyed will be restored, but the cause of their destruction will be forgotten." The human admiral stood straighter, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "This is humanity's judgment upon you. You will not be martyrs. You will not be remembered as great conquerors. You will not become legends that future tyrants might seek to emulate. You will simply fade from history as if you never existed at all." But our achievements, our technology, our 1,000 years of expansion," Vextharn protested, "will be credited to other species or listed as unknown in origin," Webb replied without emotion. "Your scientific discoveries will be attributed to the civilizations you stole them from. Your architectural monuments will be redesigned to remove all Zenthroni characteristics. Even your language will be systematically removed from galactic databases." Counselor Celeste stepped forward, her young voice breaking with desperation. "Please, Admiral Webb, death would be more merciful than this. To be erased from history entirely, it means that everything we were, everything we accomplished, will be as if it never happened." Webb turned his full attention to her, and for a moment his expression softened slightly. "That is exactly the point. You built an empire on the suffering of others. You destroyed hundreds of civilizations and enslaved millions of beings. You kept records of their final moments for your entertainment. The Admiral's voice grew harder again. Now you will experience something far worse than death. You will experience complete irrelevance. Future generations will never know your name. The species you terrorized will forget you ever existed. You will become nothing more than a blank space in the historical record. High Counselor Vexitharn sank to the floor of the council chamber, his ancient crystal form dimming to barely visible levels. 4,000 years of life, conquest, and pride had been reduced to absolute meaninglessness in a single conversation. "How?" he whispered. "How is such a thing possible?" "Because we control galactic communication networks now," Webb explained. "Every database, every archive, every educational system. We have been systematically editing your species out of existence. For weeks, the process is nearly complete." The human admiral activated another display showing news broadcasts from across the galaxy. Liberated species were celebrating their freedom, but when reporters asked who had enslaved them, the former captives looked confused. They remembered being imprisoned, but could not quite recall by whom. "Memory modification technology," Webb said, noting the council's horrified expressions. "We are not forcing anyone to forget. We are simply making it easier for them to move past their trauma. The specific details of their oppression are fading, while their joy in freedom grows stronger." "You're stealing our history," Counselor Mordeth said, his voice hollow with despair. "We're giving your victims the chance to heal," Webb corrected. "The galaxy doesn't need to remember the monsters who hurt them. It only needs to remember that freedom is precious and worth defending." The transmission continued for several more minutes as Webb outlined the complete scope of humanity's historical revision project. Every mention of the Zenthroni Empire was being removed from galactic civilization. Their language would be extinct within a year. Their cultural achievements would be forgotten. Even their name would vanish from the lips of every being in the galaxy. When the transmission ended, the Crystal Council sat in stunned silence. They had expected death or imprisonment. They had been prepared for physical punishment or economic sanctions, but this was something beyond their worst nightmares. They would live, but they would live as ghosts. Their species would survive, but only as an obscure population on a single world that no one else cared about. Their 1,000-year empire would be remembered only as a vague period when something bad happened to various species, but no one would recall exactly what. Meanwhile, throughout the galaxy, the process of forgetting continued with mechanical precision. Human teams worked with liberated species to help them focus on rebuilding rather than dwelling on past trauma. Historical databases were updated to remove references that might cause psychological harm to survivors. Educational materials were revised to emphasize hope and recovery rather than the details of oppression. The beings who had suffered under Zenthroni rule were not forced to forget. They were simply given the opportunity to let go of pain that served no useful purpose. Many chose to embrace this gift, finding that their lives became happier and more productive when they stopped dwelling on the specific identity of their former oppressors. Within 6 months, the erasure was complete. The name Zenthroni appeared in no database accessible to galactic civilization. Their language was dead. Their cultural symbols had been removed from all public spaces. Their architectural style had been modified beyond recognition. The crystal beings themselves remained alive on their homeworld, but they lived in complete isolation. Human monitoring stations ensured that they could not leave their system or communicate with the outside galaxy. They became a closed population, forgotten by everyone except themselves. Some Zenthroni tried to preserve their history by carving records into crystal formations. Others attempted to pass down their culture through oral traditions. But with each passing generation, the memories became less clear. Children who had never seen the Empire found it difficult to believe their elders' stories about galactic conquest. 100 years later, young Zenthroni thought their ancestors' tales of empire were just myths and legends. The idea that their species had once ruled hundreds of worlds seemed as impossible as flying without technology. They were simply one of many species confined to their homeworld, and they could not imagine why. 200 years later, even the myths had faded. The Zenthroni remembered that they had once been important somehow, but the specific details were lost. They developed new cultures and new purposes, but always with a sense that something significant had been forgotten. Throughout the galaxy, other species prospered under human protection. The former slaves built new civilizations on worlds of their choosing. Trade networks flourished. Scientific advancement accelerated. Art and culture bloomed as species who had lived in fear for generations finally felt safe to explore their potential. When historians of these species studied their past, they found references to a dark period when their ancestors had been enslaved by unknown oppressors. But the records were incomplete, and no one seemed particularly interested in identifying the specific villains. It was more important to celebrate their liberation and focus on building better futures. The humans, meanwhile, became the galaxy's protectors and teachers. They shared their technology selectively, always ensuring that no species could develop weapons capable of repeating the Zenthroni mistake. They established laws and treaties that prevented aggressive expansion. They built a new galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. And in quiet moments, when human leaders gathered in private, they would sometimes speak in whispers about the species that had made them angry. They would remind each other why vigilance was necessary and why humanity must never allow such atrocities to happen again. But they never spoke the name aloud. Even among themselves, even in the most secure locations, that particular word was forbidden. It had been erased too completely, deleted too thoroughly. Like their former owners, the name itself had become a ghost. The humans had achieved something that no other species in galactic history had managed. They had made their enemies disappear not just physically, but conceptually. The Zenthroni Empire had been so thoroughly erased that it might as well have never existed at all. And in the end, that was the most terrifying demonstration of human power. Not their advanced weapons or their superior strategy, but their ability to edit reality itself, to make entire civilizations vanish from the collective memory of the galaxy. Other species learned the lesson well. Never make humanity angry enough to decide that you should be forgotten. Because once humans made that decision, no force in the galaxy could ensure that anyone would remember your name again.